I'm going to guess, kind of around 10 or 11 years old. I remember watching an episode of All in the Family. And I remember because I was forbidden to watch All in the Family. But this episode, there was a scene between Archie Bunker and Meathead, and they were both in the activity of putting on their shoes. And they both bent over at the same time, except Meathead put his on a sock and a sock and a shoe and a shoe. And Archie Bunker put his on a sock and a shoe and a sock and a shoe. And they watched out of the corner of their eyes how each was doing this. And then they began to get into this argument or this discord about who was right. And even in that moment, I was thinking at 10 or 11 years old, how silly, how stupid, how trivial to argue about something that's going to lead to the exact same solution, right? And I think about us, and I think about the things that we have attachments to in our world. This whole month is centered around the theme of attachment, and how some of us have a sock and a shoe approach to life, and some of us have a sock and a shoe approach to life. And by golly, if we won't argue about that, by golly, if we won't even hold each other in contempt sometimes, realizing that the very destination and the very solution that is true for us will eventually unveil itself. And so I'm fascinated by this topic of attachment. I'm fascinated about how it's showing up in my own life, and because it's taking me deeper. If there's anything that I would extend as an invitation to you, it's go deeper. Go deeper. Even if you've been doing this kind of work, even if you are, to me, even in my own opinion of you, you're a spiritual giant, my encouragement to you would be to go deeper. And going deeper means beginning to look at and examine truly our attachments. And so I came across a quote from our founder, Ernest Holmes, that said, "The divine intelligence has always known what it is doing." Always. The divine intelligence has always known what it was doing. And yet you and I want to argue with that sometimes, especially when we see people behaving a certain way that doesn't match what we feel should be a sock and a shoe approach or what have you. And so that's really the basis or the genesis of what I'm going to talk about today, the genesis of our pain. Our pain, the pain that we carry, the residual pain that we carry, stems from attachment. Stems from something whereby we had an agenda or we wish that other people would have acted differently or said something differently, or the response would have somehow been different than what we remembered it to be. And as we hold on to that, and as we age with that, then the residue of that attachment begins to morph and carry on a life of its own. In fact, it becomes embellished, and we become very, very good at telling the story, right? And that still then is the spark or the flame or the energy underneath the pain that we go through. So this month we are looking at the topic of attachments and examining how the mental patterning of having certain levels of attachments to outcomes, behaviors, reactions, emotions, events is actually the midwife to this emotional pain or distress that we continue to carry. So that's why I was fascinated by this book. That's our book of the month, which is called The 5 Levels of Attachment by Don Miguel Ruiz, Jr. And I shared with you last week that he's broken it down in such a way that it makes it palatable to understand and also fascinating. And he says you go from the realm of non-attachment to fanaticism. And somewhere in between lies us. And we've kind of bounced back, haven't we? But non-attachment is really having no opinion whatsoever about the circumstances or the events that are taking place around us. And I don't know about you, but I have to go out of the country to have non-attachment. Complete, solid non-attachment. Because in our culture and in the way in which we do things, I have opinions. And I have preferences. And I realize that in that, I'm constantly having to check in and to see, own what it is that you're feeling in this moment. So non-attachment is that thing of whereby we can just be in the presence of something and not take anything personally. He writes, if someone were to say or do something insulting, when we are mindful of this level 1, which he calls non-attachment, it wouldn't bother us. Their words and their actions would fall up of us like loose garments, as there is nothing to stick to. Because our love is not based on a behavior that we agree with or find acceptable. We love them, even through such instances. So from here, every possibility is available to us. We have the freedom to evolve as life evolves and to engage the people that we love without the need to domesticate them to our point of view. And domesticate is a big word that the Toltecs use to describe the way in which we have evolved in our knowledge. They say that in the Toltec wisdom, which is what this book is based on, is that our domestication, our understanding and the way in which we relate to everything is something that has been spoon-fed or handed down to us because of our environment. And when we start to look at that, we realize we could have been in any other environment and have a whole different set of standards. So whose standard is right? They're just different. They're just different approaches. And if we go back to what Ernest Holmes said, divine intelligence has always known what it was doing, then maybe we live in a global experience where there are many paths to the same solution. And so what makes ours right and someone else's wrong? And so as we look at that, it's really on a quest for freedom, personal freedom. And so is it possible then for us to stay completely non-attached? I would say that the answer would be no. Because in some form, if that were our constant, I would feel that we would be somewhat mechanistic, somewhat robotic. Because we have a feeling, and in that feeling we gain knowledge. Now, whether that knowledge was gained through domestication or not, knowledge is the thing that then breeds what we call preference. We as babies developed into stages of awareness, and those awarenesses became our field of knowledge. So from this book, Ruiz Jr. writes, so knowledge then is a natural, healthy tool that provides us with the information that we need to make choices about where we wish to place our attention and to take action. So in this level of moving from non-attachment now to some attachment, it's, according to us, valuable to the degree that we don't distort the knowledge. Distort the knowledge. So what does that look like? Again, being in the midst of something that has elements of fanaticism or has elements of structure and tightness about it. And so yesterday, Gay Pride is happening in the park here in Atlanta. And as always is the custom, every single year, there are those protesters who stand outside of the gates. And I look at them, and I watch, and I observe, and yesterday was no different. I did have to laugh because one of the very elaborate signs said what it meant to be a true Christian. And on there it said, do not listen to rock and roll, rap, or country music. So Yoshi, I'm really sorry, but and so, but what I noticed was the utmost energy that was coming out of this one particular man's mouth. And I called him the barking protester. And the barking protester did their protesting. And what is the opportunity in that moment is to step back and to go, I wonder what his domestication must have been like. I wonder what his path must have been like. What information that he was given. Because in his path of knowledge, because people aren't born hating. People learn hate through domestication. People learn separatism through domestication. So as you could stand there, you could look and you could observe and you could wonder. You could be in wonderment or question, what must his life journey have been like in order to bring him to this point where he would not only just invest his time and in his energy, but his money in these super glossy big signs that he's carrying around telling you that you're wrong and you're going to go to hell and God hates you. And so you look and you go, that's his preference. That's his preference. That's his understanding. Our job then is to understand what our preference is, and at the same time, not make another person wrong for theirs.